Well, it's January, and there's not a lot going on around the farm in January, and we forgot to make vanilla last year. We love to make vanilla and give it out to our friends at holiday time. So we're going to get an early start this year and make some homemade vanilla. We order our vanilla beans online. I believe these are Madagascar vanilla beans. And we simply cut them in half, slice them down the middle, and then we're going to place them in a mason jar. We're going to take this mason jar and we're going to fill it up with some vodka, and we're going to let these soak. It usually takes about 3 or 4 months, but we're actually going to let these soak all the way until next Christmas to get an extra special flavor on this vanilla. And these beans, you can actually use them a couple times, so we'll take and use these for a second batch. We'll just double the amount of beans and we'll make a second batch of vanilla with these, so they're good for more than one use. We're going to store this in a nice dark, cool place. This is our cabinet where we store our other canned goods. This cabinet was full last fall. I love February. February seems like the month that we start to pull out of winter. It was a mild winter this year, though we can have a lot of snow on the ground at this time also. But the one thing that we really enjoy doing in February is starting to tap our maple trees. We're going to drill the trees at an upward angle, and then we're going to take and put a plastic spile into the trees. We like to use the tubing to collect our syrup. We used to use buckets hanging on the trees, but I find the tubing's a little bit easier because we can connect the tubing to the spile and leave our buckets on the ground. This just makes a much more user-friendly approach for us. All in all, it's a pretty easy setup. This is a group of tree on the side of our property. We also tap a group of trees kind of in the back of our property, but they're all along the edges of the woods where they get good sunlight. The sap will flow best if the temperatures are above freezing during the day and below freezing at night. So if the weather has been cooperating, in as little as a week we can be collecting sap to boil down into maple syrup. And we can end up with 2, 3, even 4 collections if we've had a good year. Depending on how much sap we have, I'll collect it in as few buckets as possible, and then I'll bring it up to our fire pit where we boil it down to make our maple syrup. We have a pretty simple setup, but it does work pretty well for us. Our fire pit is lined with fire brick, so it does tend to hold the heat in pretty well. I just use a couple of restaurant pans. Each one can fit about 5 gallons of sap in it, and we'll get an open fire going underneath and get it boiling. It'll take us generally about 4 hours to boil down maybe 20 gallons of sap. We'll end up getting about 2 ounces of syrup for every gallon, so if we're doing 20 gallons, that's about 40 ounces of syrup. Because we're making such a small amount of syrup, it's not very easy to control the temperature for that amount in our large pans, so we'll finish the process inside. We'll get it up to the 219.5 degrees it needs to be. We'll filter it through our filter cloths and into our mason jars. This particular day we did not have a lot of sap to boil down, so we only ended up with about 1.5 pints of syrup. The next thing I did was prune my fruit trees. I wanted to do this while they were still dormant. I hadn't pruned fruit trees before, so this was the first time doing this. And I have to tell you, I was a little bit nervous. I thought I was going to ruin the trees, but we went and did it in a methodical manner. We kind of took our time and we went through the many fruit trees we have in our property, with the hopes that we'd have a great harvest this summer. Each variety of tree we have on the property requires a different pruning method. This is a peach tree, and they like to have an open base type design, not a central leader. So we're going to trim out some of the interior portion of this tree and some of these extra branches to hopefully increase the harvest of this tree. This is a white peach in particular, and I love the peaches off of this tree. The only drawback is you can't can these peaches. March is when we can start concentrating on the growing season once again. We've started our seedlings here. We start a lot of them in actually February, some of the colder crops that we want to get in early, and some of the ones that take a little bit longer to grow, like these tomatoes. And then we'll start planting our high tunnel. The high tunnel we like to plant in early March. One of the first things we like to plant is potatoes. The first thing we need to do is start cleaning up some of these weeds. We keep the soil covered all winter long, and we have grass clippings, we have leaves that we've raked up during the fall time because you don't want to keep that soil uncovered. So we're going to clean out these weeds, and we're going to start prepping the soil in here. This bucket full of weeds, we're going to actually take this and bring this up to our chickens. They love to have this for a treat. We like to disturb the soil as little as possible, and we definitely don't want to use a tiller. So we are using this broad fork to loosen up the soil. This will help get some air in the soil and loosen that soil up so it's not as hard, give a lot better bed for our potatoes to grow in, but it won't disrupt the soil as much as tilling it would, because we want to keep the biological structure of the soil as intact as possible. Now I am putting a trench in the soil to plant our potatoes, and I know this is disruptive to the soil. We're going to try to find some ways that are less disruptive in the future and experiment with those. But once we have our trench in, we're going to mix up some fertilizer. We like to use some bone meal and some organic all-purpose fertilizer and compost. These are potatoes we had left over from last year. As you can see, they're sprouting pretty well. Sometimes if we don't have any seed potatoes from last year, we'll take and buy some organic potatoes at the grocery store, and we'll sit them next to a bag of onions. The onions will actually help them start to sprout, and we'll get them ready that way to put them in the ground. Once the potatoes are buried in the soil, we're going to take the grass clippings and leaves that we had on the soil to begin with. We're going to put that back over the beds to help hold in that moisture, and that'll decompose and give them some extra nutrients while they're growing. We're now going to take and prep another row in our high tunnel. This row we're going to put some lettuce in, and we're going to prep that in pretty much the same way we did for the potatoes. So I'm going to plant this half and half. I'm going to use this white Paris for half, and then this crispy iceberg lettuce for the other half. This part of the high tunnel we're going to use for our onions, and we're going to prep this much the same way we did for the potatoes. I'm going to loosen that soil up with the broad fork. We're then going to amend the soil with our organic fertilizer. We'll also use the composted cow manure we did in the other trench for the potatoes. Sometimes we'll use our own compost. We just don't seem to have enough of it to go around this year. We're going to use onion sets in here and see how those do this year. We're actually doing the red onions and some white onions. That'll give us two different varieties to choose from. The last spot we're going to plant is for peas. We're going to put it on the back side of this cattle panel here, which is on the other side of our lettuce. And we're going to prep that with the composted cow manure as well. Our go-to variety are the sugar snap peas because we like the stringless edible pods. The last thing we have to do is give it a good soaking.
Oh, it is so nice to have stuff planted in the ground.
When April comes around, we're thinking chickens and turkeys. This is the time we get all our meat birds. We typically raise about 30 Freedom Ranger chicks, and we'll do 8 broad-breasted white turkeys. Turkeys we typically get about a week before we'll get the chicks. Gives them a little bit longer time to grow. We like our turkeys to be in that 14-pound class at the time of processing, and the chickens will typically be in that 5-pound area. This year we ended up getting the chickens and the turkeys only a few days apart, so they're fairly close in size right now, but the turkeys will soon outgrow the chickens. Our chickens come from Freedom Ranger Hatchery. We get those mail order, so they come to the post office. The turkeys, we typically will pick them up at a local Tractor Supply. We like to use the induction heat plates for the chickens and the turkeys. We feel this is a safer option for us than the heat lamps, and we are raising these right now upstairs in my workshop. But it doesn't take them long to start outgrowing that stock tank. So by the end of the month, it is time for them to be transitioned into the mobile brooder that we have set up for them. And we're going to get that going now. We built this mobile brooder on an old boat trailer that I have. And we're just going to fill it up with some wood shavings. We will put one of those induction plates in there. This way we can actually bring them in and outside as needed, get them accustomed to the outdoor weather. But if it's really, really cold, I can push this back into the garage and keep them warm. Showing about 50 now. I think it's colder than that. We'll put the heat on in the garage and warm it up a tad. We are insulated and heated, so you can warm that a little bit, but we'll keep an eye on them, see how they look. And this will be their home for the next couple weeks. The next project I had was building another chicken tractor, because we decided we were going to raise the turkeys in one and the chickens in the other one, and we only have one right now. I prefer the Siskovich chicken tractor. I think it's the best design out there. The only difference I do is I build mine out of cedar because I don't want to use pressure treated lumber, and I'm also going to build it this time using cedar decking. I think it's going to give me a little bit better structure, and I wanted to make this structure easily to maintain. If I ever needed to change anything, I could take it apart easily. So I kind of did a modular design. It seems to work out really well, and I'm very happy with it. Here's a look at the framework of the new tractor. Now the next thing I'm going to do is make a new wheel design. I didn't really like having to bend down and put the wheels on and off every time, so I came up with this design here. It's kind of a cam type system, so the wheels are simply lifted up by pulling on that lever, and it makes it easy to move the tractor, and you never have to worry about the wheels falling off again. The next modification I do to all my chicken tractors is I add an electric wire around the perimeter to protect from predators. So this is what bee packages look like when you get them at the post office. Both packages are still connected together. They're wrapped in some screening. There's no bees on the outside, but the post office looked very eager to get rid of them. The next step is to get these bees into their new home. Now it's time to move the turkeys out for the first time onto fresh grass. And the chickens are out on fresh grass also. By June, we're making the transition from our cool weather crops to our warmer weather crops. These are our tomatoes that we had started inside. They've done pretty nicely and they've gotten pretty large. Here's the last of our lettuce in the garden. Our potatoes are starting to die back in the high tunnel. We'll be harvesting these the end of next month. Here's the last of our peas. But now it's time to start harvesting the garlic scapes. We planted these garlic bulbs last fall, and the scapes are now ready. We're going to take and harvest these and make them into some garlic pesto and some garlic powder. These are potatoes we planted outside probably a little over a month ago, and they're doing really well. These are onions that we actually started from seeds in February. They are doing very, very well. This is probably the best we've ever done with onions that we have started from seeds, so we're very hopeful for a great harvest. We put a new corn plot in this year. This is sweet corn that we planted probably towards the end of May. It's maybe about 4 weeks old at this point. We're hoping that it's going to be knee-high by the 4th of July. These transplants are doing well. These are our cucumbers. These are our watermelons. And we have pumpkins. Well, the good news is the pruning I did earlier this year didn't harm our fruit trees. In fact, we have more fruit this year than we have ever had on our trees. The mail order bees seem happy as well. Well, freezer camp is in session. We have processed all of our chickens and turkeys. We had 30 Freedom Ranger chickens and 8 broad-breasted white turkeys. We parted out 6 of the turkeys into wings, legs, and ground turkey. It's now time to start harvesting the high tunnel. We've got the onions flopping over, so they're ready to pick, and we have the potatoes coming out of the ground. We also have our garlic coming out of the main garden. Here's some of our potatoes. Here are the onions. These are the ones we started from sets. This is our garlic. We have our garlic and our onions in our barn loft to cure. We're also starting to harvest our green beans. And we've got a treat with some zucchini and squash. Each year we like to get a couple of new egg layers. We have them separated from our regular flock so that they can get to know each other. And the canning has begun. These are the first green beans that Deb has canned for the season. She's got tomatoes that are ready to be made into sauce, so she'll be busy canning so that we have all this for winter time. This is some tomato sauce that was done in the water bath canner. We also have our first watermelon of the season. We're going to give this one a try. Picking a watermelon is always a little bit stressful because you just don't know what you're going to get and you can't put it back on the vine, but this one doesn't look too bad. And there's even some pepita pumpkins that are ready to process. Deb will make pumpkin puree out of them, and she'll also save the seeds to add to her homemade granola. This was the first of several harvests of our sweet corn. We were able to enjoy some fresh corn for dinner, and the rest we blanched, put in baggies, and we froze that to enjoy over the winter time. We have our first harvest of peppers out of the garden. Deb was real excited to process that up and be able to freeze that to enjoy over winter time. And the other great thing is that our onions were ready. These onions were the ones we planted from seeds, and they did phenomenal. We are so happy with the harvest we got this year. We have finally started to get some red chili peppers on our plants, so I decided to pick what we had and see if I could make a quick hot sauce.
So add a little salt. I'm going to pour this into a measuring cup. I think it's going to make it easier.
This sauce was unbelievably hot, so I added some melted butter and some honey to tone it down a bit, and I made it into a buffalo sauce to enjoy on our Freedom Ranger chicken wings. This was the first harvest of carrots that we had. This was a carrot bed that just got way out of control with weeds. We really weren't sure what we were going to get out of it, but we were pleasantly surprised.
This one looks like a good one.
I don't know if I can get it. Oh, that's a big carrot.
So here's our harvest from that small bed.
And the harvest of potatoes continues. We had started harvesting this bed already, but we figured we'd finish up the row.
So that's what we got from about 40 feet of row. We did throw them on a scale. With the basket, it was just about 54 pounds, so we're probably pretty close to about 50 pounds.
Okay, it's 2 days later since we've picked the potatoes, and today I spent the day doing what we can do to preserve them.
One of the most exciting things we did this year was we bought a new farm. We've always wanted to raise some larger animals, and we just don't have the space to do it now. And when the opportunity came up to buy some farmland right down the road from our house, we couldn't resist. So we've ended up with this beautiful piece of property that hopefully we can develop into a beautiful farm. But back to carrots. This is our second bed of carrots that we're harvesting. This one wasn't quite as run over with weeds as the first, but it was pretty bad. The weather is getting colder, and it's time that we process our loofah before they freeze on the vine. So we've picked our loofah, and we're going to process those to make into sponges. We make these sponges and we give them away as gifts. We use them in our own kitchen. It's a nice renewable sponge that you can throw right in your compost bin when you're done with it. Well, the weather is getting colder and the ground is starting to freeze, so we need to get these carrots out of the ground before they're frozen in for winter. It just goes to show you, though, even a neglected carrot bed can be productive.
But we didn't, and this was like our other carrots, we didn't take care of this bed at all.
Got away from us. It is a mess in here.
So these are potatoes from our second planting in our high tunnel. These were planted back in August. So we're going to get these out of the ground. These ones we can probably store over winter in the house. And all those carrots that we got, Deb has been busy canning those. And we have bags of them in our refrigerator downstairs that we can store for winter time. Thanks for joining us.